Chapter 141, Commandery Princess Yanchen. This chapter is updated by novels.pl. There was another young lady aged 15 or 16 laughing at the opposite side of the lake about 200 meters away. She giggled. "Ha ha, you two have been fooled. I'm here, the real princess. I'll accept the gift of the one who swims fastest and reaches me first. PHHHF." Without hesitation, Zhuo Longlin jumped into the lake straight away. He splashed water all over the pavilion and swam towards the princess as fast as he could. He had already lost to Zhang Yuochen once. He couldn't lose to him again. However, Zhang Yuochen didn't jump into the water like Zhuo Longlin had. He stood there at Mid-Lake Pavilion calmly. He had realized that neither the young woman standing in Mid-Lake Pavilion, nor the one on the opposite side of the bank was the real 13th Commandery Princess. Apparently, the 13th Commandery Princess made fun of them like they were fools. A sense of antipathy appeared in Zhang Yuochen's mind. He didn't like the feeling of being tricked. "Fine. I'm here to beg her for help. I shouldn't defend her." He tried his best to control the anger in his heart and left the Mid-Lake Pavilion for the real 13th Commandery Princess. The real 13th Commandery Princess was surely enjoying the show from somewhere not far from the lake. In the far tower, the 13th Commandery Princess, wearing a dress of pearls, was combing her hair. She pinned a golden hairpin into her luscious locks. She looked towards the aqua lake and saw the two maidservants standing at Mid-Lake Pavilion on the edge of the shore making fools of the two princes. She was overjoyed. A relatively beautiful maidservant stood behind the 13th Commandery Princess and chuckled. "Two princes from an inferior commandery want to marry your majesty. They are exactly like a toad trying to swallow a swan. They follow our orders and do what we ask them to do like idiots. They are drowned dogs. Ha ha." The other maidservant laughed. The 13th Commandery Princess let out a sound and stared at Mid-Lake Pavilion. She said, "Hey, look, that one didn't jump into the lake." The two maidservants looked towards the lake and stared at Zhang Yuochen, who was standing in Mid-Lake Pavilion. One of the maidservants said coldly, "He's got nerves not to obey your majesty." At the same time, they saw that the young man was staring at them from the pavilion. Standing at Mid-Lake Pavilion, Zhang Yuochen looked at the young woman who was sitting in the tower and confirmed that she was the real 13th Commandery Princess. Clash. He displayed Shadow of the Royal Wind Dragon once again. He glided across the water, flew over the lake, and rushed towards the tower. Zhuo Longlin was still swimming towards the edge of the lake. "Your Majesty, he is coming towards us. What should we do now?" one of the maidservants asked in panic. The 13th Commandery Princess sat in her chair and said confidently, "Even if he knows I'm making fun of him, he can do nothing to me. Moreover, my 10th brother is guarding the tower downstairs. He won't be able to come up." Zhang Yuochen had arrived at the tower and was about to climb up. A young man, holding a folding fan, walked out from the door of the first level of the tower. He blocked Zhang Yuochen's way, glanced at him and said, "Where does this bumpkin come from? You're not supposed to come to this tower. Go away now." Zhang Yuochen frowned his eyebrows, restrained the anger in his heart, and responded calmly, "I'm here to see the 13th Commandery Princess. Can you please inform her for me?" "What is this? Do you think that you're good enough to meet the 13th Commandery Princess? If you don't back down, I'll break your legs and throw you out," the young man said arrogantly, sweeping his sleeves to the side. This arrogant young man was the 10th Prince of Cayenne's Yue Commandery. Yet, rather than behaving as a prince, he acted like a little brat from a wealthy family. Zhang Yuochen didn't know that he was the 10th Prince of Cayenne's Yue Commandery. He thought that he was a prince from another commandery, deliberately putting obstacles in his way and obstructing him from seeing the 13th Commandery Princess. Zhang Yuochen was already in a bad mood. He hadn't expected there to be somebody blocking his way when he arrived at the tower. It annoyed him even more. Zhang Yuochen became sterner and said, "What if I insist on seeing the 13th Commandery Princess?" The 10th Prince let out a laugh. He stood with his legs apart, pointed at the ground between them and said, "Ha ha, of course. You can. If you crawl between my legs, I'll let you see the 13th Commandery Princess. Don't you think you're being a bit ridiculous?" Zhang Yuochen asked with anger in his eyes. "Ha ha. I like bullying you. What are you going to do about it?" The 10th prince rolled up his sleeves and exposed his arms. He lifted and pushed his palm to Zhang Yuochen's head. He wanted to press Zhang Yuochen down and force him to crawl between his legs. Zhang Yuochen's eyes narrowed. He retreated a step back and avoided the 10th prince's palm. He couldn't tolerate any more. He gripped the hilt and swung out his 2-meter-long scabbard. He struck the 10th prince's chest and he flew back with a bang. Zhang Yuochen hadn't wanted to cause any trouble. He had tried to control his anger, but the 10th prince had forced his hand. Since he was now very angry, he dared him to do anything to fight back. Since it had come to this, fists became the only language for communication. Boom! The 10th prince gave a shout of pain and slammed into the door of the tower. The impact broke the door and he fell to the ground heavily. Such a disgraceful bastard. How dare you hit me? I need you to Zhang Yuochen ignored him and walked into the tower holding his scabbard. The 10th prince screamed out again. With a bang, he flew out once again and crashed into the wall. Within about 15 minutes the 10th prince of Cayenne's Yue Commandery was wounded heavily. Struggling, he crawled up to the top of the tower and hid behind the 13th Commandery princess. He scowled at Zhang Yuochen, his whole body shaking. How dare you hit me? I want you to die in a horrible way. You're dead, kid. Boom. Zhang Yuochen stared coldly at the 10th prince. He activated his genuine chi, struck out a palm and broke one of the pillars of the tower. He claimed, die? I don't care. I would rather die with dignity than live in humiliation. The 13th Commandery princess was shocked when she saw that her brother had been beaten to a pulp. She quickly helped him up and asked, brother, what happened? Why have you been beaten? His entire face was swollen, and he sported 2 black eyes. Sister, you have to take revenge for me. This bastard is outrageous. He dares to beat up the royal family of Cayenne's Yue Commandery. We have to purge his clan and destroy his entire family. Hearing the conversation between the 13th Commandery princess and the 10th prince, Zhang Yuochen was startled. This rich playboy is actually the 10th prince of Cayenne's Yue Commandery. Oh god, I'm done. The 13th Commandery princess stared at Zhang Yuochen thinking that the 9th prince of Yanwu Commandery was over-presumptuous. She couldn't believe he dared to hit a member of the royal family. She was extremely irritated. She said, take this crazy person away and lock him in the celestial prison. The 2 young women who stood next to the 13th Commandery princess were her royal guards. They had relatively high cultivations for maid-servants. Both were warriors at the initial stage of the Black Realm. They both took out 4th-class genuine martial arms and were ready to take Zhang Yuochen down. Although Zhang Yuochen clearly knew that things had turned south, he didn't show any fear. He said modestly, Your Majesty, please don't neglect the fact that the 10th prince is the one who humiliated me first and hence why I defended myself. Is it wrong to protect myself? Right or wrong is not important. What matters is that you have wounded the Prince of Cayenne's Yue Commandery. The 13th Commandery princess responded coldly. She wasn't going to bother being rational with Zhang Yuochen. Zhang Yuochen had come to meet the 13th Commandery princess under the order of Yanwu Commandery prince. By marrying her, he hoped to ask for reinforcement for Yanwu Commandery. However, when he found that the 13th Commandery princess was so irrational, he didn't want to talk to her anymore. He handed over the gift, turned around and left the room. Seeing Zhang Yuochen leave, the 2 female royal guards wanted to take him down. Yet, when they rushed in front of him, he quickly struck out his fingers and blocked their meridians so that they stood still and couldn't move. I hope the 13th Commandery princess is a rational person. He stared coldly at the 13th Commandery princess. Having finished speaking to the princess, he turned and walked out of the tower. In Zhang Yuochen's eyes, the princes and princesses of Cayenne's Yue Commandery prince were all ridiculous. As he was walking downstairs, he saw that Zhuo Longlin had finally swum to the edge of the shore. He sighed and walked towards the exit of the garden. Why is he here? Led by a maid-servant, Huang Yanchen arrived at the tower. She was surprised to see Zhang Yuochen leaving the tower. There was a confused expression on her beautiful face. Since the intermediate relic exploration test was taking place in 2 months, Huang Yanchen wanted to elevate her cultivation as much as possible and therefore, She had returned to Cayenne's Yue Commandery. She wanted to ask Cayenne's Yue Commandery prince to help her buy a drop of holy water so as to facilitate her practice. When she arrived back at Cayenne's Yue Commandery, she heard that her younger sister, the 13th Commandery princess, was picking her prince consort and would have an arranged marriage. Huang Yanchen had 36 older and younger sisters in total, while the 13th Commandery princess was her only true sister from the same parents. She was her one and only biological sister in the entire family. When she'd heard this news, she had been irritated and rushed into the palace. She had scolded Cayenne's Yue Commandery prince to his face and almost brought the palace down. Afterwards, she made her way to the manor and went to see the 13th Commandery princess. She never expected to see Zhang Yuochen when she arrived at the manor. "Commandery Princess Yanchen, please follow me. The 13th Commandery princess is on the top floor of the tower." The arrogant maidservant who had tricked Zhang Yuochen and Zhuo Longlen earlier behaved politely in front of Huang Yanchen. She bowed towards her the whole time and didn't dare to lift her head. The maidservant certainly knew how powerful Commandery Princess Yanchen was. She was Cayenne's Commandery prince's favorite among all the princesses. Even though she criticized her father to his face, he didn't dare say a word and fight back. Therefore, the maidservant acted carefully so as to avoid offending such an important person. Huang Yanchen looked away and rubbed her snow-white chin gently. Why was the 9th prince of Yunwu Commandery here? Of course he was here to arrange a marriage with the 13th princess, said the maidservant. An arranged marriage? Huang Yanchen was surprised and laughed out loud. He came here to arrange a marriage with my 13th sister? Ha ha. What a joke.